for us. I am the one and only presenter today that is not employed by a vocational rehabilitation program. I actually represent the programs that you'll be hearing from today from Lisa, Alice, and Libby. I work for the Council of State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation. We are a membership organization, a nonprofit membership organization, and the state vocational rehabilitation agencies are our members, and the state directors are the voting members of our organization. So I wanted to make that clear before we got into the conversation that I don't work for an agency. I did for 30 years, but now I'm working for the nonprofit organization. We represent about 20,000 employees of the state, federal VR programs across the country. Our task is to really provide legislative advocacy and opportunities for exchange and education for our membership. Technically, I and another member of our staff are registered lobbyists, and so our job is to pound the halls of Congress to advocate for those issues important to the public vocational rehabilitation program, and also to provide those opportunities for our members to network and to learn and to exchange ideas with one another. And we often do that at our two membership meetings a year. In the spring, it's in Washington, D.C. In the fall, it's somewhere else in the country. We also manage a national network of employers who've shown an interest in hiring persons with disabilities. Our work is managed by committees. As a matter of fact, two that are on the call today have served in leadership positions. Alice is the chair of our Deaf, Hard of Hearing, and Latent Deafened committee. And Lisa has chaired a committee, and she's also the immediate past president as of 12 years. You probably feel like it was 12 years ago, 12 days ago of CSAVR. So I'm very thankful for their leadership. Technically, I work for these ladies that are on the call today. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. in the metro area. You might be interested that across the country, since the inception of the national program in 1920, we have served 18 million, we've helped over 18 million people go into work, into competitive employment. Well over 90% of those individuals have significant disabilities. And any one day, the public VR program across the country is touching the lives of better than 1 million people. This last year, 328,000 plus were actually provided services through what we call the Individualized Plan for Employment. 184,000 plus of those individuals went into competitive and integrated employment. And then across the country, we have about 8,300 trained vocational rehabilitation counselors in the 80 agencies. In general, the public VR program assists individuals to go to work, which provides $3.1 billion in wages to those individuals. They pay about $1 billion in taxes. We've calculated that for those that have gone off of Social Security benefits, there's a 7-to-1 recoupment with those services, and that results in an $828 million savings to Social Security. So the public VR program is active and well across the country. In the states that are represented here today, there are 7 agencies. And wanted to clarify why there are 80 across the country. In many states, such as Connecticut, Maine, New Jersey, New York, and Vermont, there are 2 agencies. There's one agency that serves individuals with significant visual impairment and blindness, and then an agency that serves other individuals with disabilities. And those are the states of Connecticut, Maine, New Jersey, New York, and Vermont. You'll hear from 2 of those today, that being Maine and New Jersey from the general agencies. And then 2 of the 7 are what we call combined agencies, which means they serve all individuals, to include those with visual impairments and blindness, New Hampshire and Pennsylvania. And you'll be hearing from Lisa, who is the director of the New Hampshire Combined Agency. For the structure of the public VR program in the United States, we are governed by the Rehabilitation Services Administration, which is within the U.S. Department of Education. The federal funding and state funding match is that we get 80% of our total budget from the federal funds. In order for us to be able to fully match those 80%, the state has to put up 20%. So it's an 80-20 match. Each of those agencies are operated by the state. We're governed by the WIOA Act of 2014, and we just received the regulations to that bill back in June of last year. And there were 4 pretty significant areas of change that are probably critical for our understanding today. I'm not going to go into detail through them because the other presenters will, but the areas that you'll hear about today that there are probably some significant changes from the previous Rehab Act is in the area of transition, the emphasis on competitive integrated employment, the priorities for internships and careers, and that consumer and business are considered equal customers. CSAVR specifically is here to support the 80 state vocational rehabilitation programs. You see our mission there, advocacy and education. We're a communication conduit both internally within our organization and then providing information to our organization from external sources and then also sharing information with those sources as well. We also help facilitate access to our federal partner. Our business services, as I mentioned in the previous slide, is called the National Employment Team, and that is where we are providing services directly to business being a dual customer of ours, and encouraging and supporting and providing services to businesses who are interested in reaching out and hiring individuals with disabilities. We also are in the lead role of providing leadership for what we are terming as the Vision 2020 initiative. We have a small leadership team. Our past president, Lisa, who you'll hear from next, is on that leadership team. And essentially, Vision 2020 is intended to demonstrate that the VR program is proactive, responsive to the principles of WIOA, and a role model in the disability employment community. A large part of our work that we are about in Vision 2020 is to ensure that our state vocational rehabilitation programs are seeking out and accessing innovation and opportunities to do things in a more creative, more positive manner, to demonstrate our willingness to forge new passages and pathways. And quite honestly, what it boils down to is being able to connect with our partners. And that is exactly why I said to start off with, we're really thrilled to be a part of this conversation, because where your organization and our Vision 2020 really connects is being able to connect with our partners. And we consider you to be a partner in our journey together. So that's kind of the big picture of what the federal objective is for vocational rehabilitation. I will be happy to give you my contact information. You're free to drop me a note, write me or send me an email, or even give me a call at that number if you have an interest in knowing more about the national program. But quite honestly, I think where the rubber hits the road is where Alice, Libby, and Lisa will be talking to you about, because they're really the ones that are doing the work. So, Dawn, I'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to open it up for any questions for Steve. You can either type them in the chat box. I don't believe anyone is actually on the line, but you can type your question in the chat box. And please, if you could just keep your questions general rather than personal, that would be wonderful. And I'll just wait a minute if you have any, and if not, we will move on to the next presenter. I see someone is typing, so I will wait.
Oh, Laura, that's a great question. Yeah, what companies do we work with? Laura, there is an infinite number. There are many cross-state line companies, and probably when you get to Lisa, Libby, and Alice, they may be able to give you some specifics in your area. But we do a lot of work with national companies across the board, everything from Microsoft, Walgreens, CVS, Best Buy, to the smaller, more local and even regional and local businesses as well. As you noted, we put over 185,000 people to work every year. And so the national network or the national employment team is focused on many of those national and regional organizations, and many of the states that are working more on the state and local organizations. Thank you, Laura.
So I will, if we have time at the end, we will open it up for more questions at that point. So let's move on. I'd like to welcome Lisa Hinton-Hatch, who is the Director of the New Hampshire Vocational Rehabilitation Services.
Great. Well, thank you, Dawn.
Us,
oh, well, thank you for having me, Dawn. And I appreciate my colleague, Alice, for getting us all involved in the webinar. I think it's great. And what Steve, I don't think, shared with you is that he was in a leadership role in both the Missouri and the Iowa VR program. I'm a former Iowan, so that was really how we first connected at conferences many years ago. Really appreciate his leadership at CSA VR. It is a critical organization to the vocational rehabilitation program, especially when we were reauthorized almost 3 years ago with the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. So let's give folks a snapshot of how vocational rehabilitation works in New Hampshire. And let me see here if I can figure out how to control these slides. How do you get it to the next one?
So,
Dawn?
Lisa, there's arrows on the bottom left.
There it is. I see it. Thank you. As I said, I'm not quite as tech savvy as others. But so in New Hampshire, a little bit of VR 101. We have 7 offices, and you can see where they're located in our state, all over the state. We are a very small VR program. We have about 100 staff total. And in New Hampshire, we are a combined agency. So our general VR cases and our blind cases are all under one agency. And we have 41 VR counselors. We have 5 business relations consultants. We also have 1 internal benefits planner that I didn't put on here, but her work is also critical to our Portsmouth office in helping customers understand their how work impacts their benefits. We have approximately a $14 million budget, so pretty small budget, but on average we have about 6,000 customers working with us at any time. The other key important thing I think for New Hampshire is that we're housed within the Department of Education in New Hampshire, and it's a real important connection for us because it allows us to have much closer relationships with the special ed department, both at the state level as well at the local level, having us in the same department. And you'll hear from the other agencies that present that we're all located in different departments, and it really does impact on how some things work within the agencies. So just a little bit of a recap for those of you out there that are not real familiar with the vocational rehabilitation process. A lot of people say, well, how do you get referrals? Referrals can come from anywhere. They could come from family, from doctors, from therapists, from our one-stop partners at America's Job Centers, come from all over the place. And a lot of them are really self-referrals. A lot of customers say to their friends and family, hey, you should work with VR. They could help you reach your goals. The next step after someone is referred is they will apply for services. They'll generally have an intake appointment with a VR counselor, And at that point, once they've got that information, they have up to 60 days to determine eligibility. And I say up to 60 days because typically it doesn't take that long. Our average in the state is about 23 or 24 days for eligibility determinations. During that time, the counselor and the customer are working on a comprehensive assessment process where they're taking into account their interests, their temperaments, what kind of work history they've had, how their disability might impact their ability to do different types of work. And all of that information is taken and synthesized into developing an individual plan for employment. And that's this IPE that I mentioned here. Not to be confused with the IEP, the Individual Education Plan, with our partners in special ed. Typically, when we develop the individual plan for employment, the customer will say, I want to be an accountant, and how can I get into some training or some services that will help me achieve those goals? The other important feature in regards to VR services is that we are helping our customers really move into a career path, so that we're not just talking about entry-level jobs, we're talking about a career pathway that's going to help them move forward in their career, and it's not one and done. We always hope at the end of our program that employment is the goal. Employment in their career field and in their job goal choice. And at that point, once they've obtained and maintained employment for at least 90 days, we do exit them from the VR program, but we do follow them. Two of our new performance indicators are looking at the percentage of our customers that are employed second quarter after exit from a program and fourth quarter after exit. We want to make sure that folks stay in those jobs, that those are good jobs that will help them achieve the skills that they need to move forward in their career. I thought I might mention in New Hampshire a few things about our strategies. And our state and governor has chosen to work through different sector strategies that help drive our state priorities, all of our programs, and employment. And I don't know how many of you on the webinar have ever been to New Hampshire, but we have four real important employment sectors. We have the healthcare sector, we have the information technology, we have manufacturing, and we have hospitality. New Hampshire is very well known for our leaf peeping and skiing and our lakes region. We have lots of manufacturers that, particularly from the aerospace industry, lots of advanced manufacturing for different components, lots of health care around the state, as do many agencies. And I also, just for your reference, added this link to the Sector Strategies resources. And there's some really great books that accompany each of the sectors to show you really how we're leading this. And I think the most important part about this is that businesses are leading these key sector strategies. This isn't the state managing this process. And I think we want to be as responsive as we can be to those business partners. They are our second customer and so critical to the work that we do. So wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we have addressed the working with students with disabilities. In our new law, in the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, vocational rehabilitation must set aside 15% of our federal allotment, which for New Hampshire, as you can see, equals about $1.8 million a year. And that money is to be provided on both a generalized or group setting or an individualized basis in those 5 areas that you see there. These are services that VR has provided all along, just in manners. And with that law, it was really a requirement or a mandate that these 5 services be provided. In New Hampshire, we chose to start out in, I think, 2015 by having 2 contracts where we had regional partnerships. And as you can see on this slide, we work with GSIL, which is Granite State Independent Living, Stratford Learning Center, and others from our community rehabilitation provider community to make this work happen. One of our organizations, GSIL, has a comprehensive program that's a 14-week program that combines all 5 of the PREET services. They also provide individual workshops. And the greatest thing about that method of providing the PREETs is that they're doing it within the community college setting. So they're kind of seeing what could potentially be next in terms of, you know, graduating from high school and moving forward into a training, you know, college situation. The other thing we've been doing a lot this summer is working on different specific summer programs that really allow students to have work-based learning experiences that can add to their resume, that can add to their knowledge and really upskilling them to be prepared for the workforce. I'm also very careful to, you know, when we're speaking with our schools, that the services, these PREET services, are not there to replace anything that the schools are already doing. We have many schools that have great programs, and they've chosen to maybe bring in a workshop on self-advocacy. We partnered with our Parent Information Center for that piece, and those opportunities have been very successful. The other thing that we've shared with our schools is that there is no cost to these services other than the transportation for getting the students to that GSIL Impact program, as you see there. So I've kind of already talked about this slide, is that we're also providing individualized PREET services that are one-on-one services with a counselor, the team, and parents and guardians as a part of that process. We might start with a generic post-school outcome or cluster and really build the services and assessments based on that. You know, VR can do a whole range of services. I think the key is that what we might provide for one student, we might not for another, just based on their needs and their disability. The other thing that I wanted to mention to folks is how we're executing our work with our business partners in business engagement, and we have chosen to develop business relations consultants around the state in 4 of our regions right now and 2 more to come. And, you know, there we're really focusing on what are the needs of the businesses, what are the questions that they have. There's no bad question. There's no fear in asking us those questions. You know, they might have a question about, well, how do I deal with accommodations? How do I deal with, you know, having staff understand working with someone with a disability? We can really help them with all those questions. We can also help them develop training programs within their business to meet their hiring needs. And so, you know, obviously our goal at the end of the day is to match the worker with the business needs. So that's really where I wanted to end so that I don't take up too much time. I've provided my contact information here, as well as my transition administrator, Kevin Stevenson, and we are certainly willing after the webinar to take any calls or emails that you have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions for Lisa? You can put them in the chat box now. I'll give a minute or two to see if anyone does.
As Alice said, we could talk for days and days and days about VR. It's really hard to put it in a nutshell. It really is.
Okay, so I don't see any questions, so I'm going to pull up Alice's. And we will welcome Alice Honeycutt, who is the director here where SPAN is located in New Jersey of the Vocational Rehabilitation Services. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the State Director for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services here in New Jersey. And as Steve mentioned, I have a sister agency, the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, that provides the exact same services, individualized services, for individuals who have a vision impairment or blind, visually impaired, or who happen to be deaf-blind. So anything I talk about as far as our service provision and our process, if you are an individual who needs the services due to a vision loss, the Commission for the Blind would be the appropriate agency to turn to. DVRS, Vocational Rehabilitation here in New Jersey, is actually under the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development, and I've also included the website, Career Connections website for New Jersey Department of Labor for any of you who are interested. Interestingly, the Commission for the Blind is actually in the Department of Human Services. So not only do we have differences among the states, within the state there's a difference here in New Jersey. It's New Jersey. What else can I say? We have 17 offices, and we are co-located in the one-stop career centers that provide generalized services to individuals who are seeking employment. So we have done a great job trying to make sure that whenever a customer comes through a door, it doesn't matter what door they come in. If they need a particular service, we work together within that one stop to determine what kind of opportunities should be made available to anyone who comes in seeking those services. Our mission, quite honestly, is to help individuals with disabilities find, get, and keep jobs. We want them to achieve employment consistent with their strengths and also take into account their needs and capabilities. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act has really pushed the button in terms of higher expectation. So we are now focusing on our career pathways as opposed to just trying to find an individual that first entry-level job. And that's a very important change within our law that Steve has already talked about. So who can be referred? I know Lisa talked a little bit about it. I'm going to talk a little bit about it too. So first of all, an individual has to want to come and be employed competitively in an integrated environment. The VR program is not an entitlement program. It's a choice program, which means that individuals need to want and be appropriate for the services that are offered. So high school students with disabilities are certainly welcome to be referred. We encourage that. And then again, with the pre-ETS, the pre-employment transition services, congressional intent is that we are really moving our services to students at a younger age in order to ensure that students know what they're doing the last day of high school and the beginning of the rest of their lives the next day. So it's not a huge disconnect. We really want to make sure that students have that pathway or have that strategy in place prior to when they graduate. So individuals with significant disabilities, and it could be a whole array as documented, are individuals that we would certainly encourage to come into the local offices. So I want to talk a little bit about the process. I'm putting a whole lot of little information here because I didn't realize it was going to come one at a time. Part of the questions that we get all the time in our local offices is the confusion about who would be eligible for services. So again, you have to want to have our service. So you have to let us know who you are. We have no way of knowing whether or not you are an individual with a disability. We don't know who you are. So you need to come and knock on our door and say, yes, I think I'd like to come in and see if I'm an appropriate person. So we talk to you, we gather the disability background. If you don't know if you qualify for services and the counselor determines that they need more information, we'll go ahead and do that piece of assessment at no cost to you. Then we have to take all the information, and the counselor determines whether or not an individual is eligible for services if you require VR services. So for instance, an individual who uses a wheelchair who comes into the one-stop may or may not need VR services. They may only need access to the public access area where they can go on and look at job lists and things like that, because they're very capable of moving forward, as opposed to an individual who might have a very specific learning disability whose thought processes get in their way of keeping that job because they process things differently. That may be a better candidate for us, but we don't know until the counselor is able to have that conversation. After we determine eligibility, and yes, we do have to have medical documentation. Remember, we're funded by taxpayer dollars, so we are required to make sure that the tax dollars are used wisely as we provide services. And because we only provide services to individuals with disabilities, we really have to document that there is a disability that's getting in your way of getting a job. At that fourth step is that individualized plan for employment. That is a document that's developed between the counselor and the individual that includes all the services that we're going to be providing. And please remember that counseling and guidance is the biggest service provided by the VR agencies. That connection with a counselor who has the expertise in vocational rehabilitation counseling is very critical to help an individual as they move forward in their pathway to employment. So I also want to talk a little bit about the pre-employment transition services. Like Lisa said, all the VR agencies are required to set aside 15% of their allotment. And I'm getting feedback right now.
If you've joined us on the phone, could you please be sure to mute your speakers?
Thank you. So our pre-employment services.
I'm not sure what that is.
It sounds like feedback,
Yeah.
and it sounds like it's better. So I apologize for that. I don't know what happened. The services for pre-employment transition, according to WIOA, must be made available to all students with disabilities who need the services. And this is new for the VR program because it stipulates that you don't have to be in our system in order to be eligible. So whether the student has applied for VR services, as long as they are a person that is a student with a disability, we can really start this whole process. So we provide several things, and the idea is to assist the students with really identifying what their career interests are, to be, how they want to move forward the day they graduate, the day after they graduate. The students need to start talking about what they're going to be doing well before the month of May and June. We work with the local education agencies, our school districts, our 350 high schools in New Jersey, that public high schools and private high schools, any institution that has that potentially educates students with disabilities, we're certainly there to work with. So we also need to make sure that families understand that the pre-employment transition services dollars can only be used to provide those specific services. And I know Libby has a list of what those services are, so I'm going to let her talk about the actual required activities. But those are the only activities that we can use the pre-employment transition services for. And that can be a little bit confusing to families when they first come into a VR agency and ask about what, I heard VR will do this. Well, it may or may not happen depending on the conversation between the counselor and the student, and we need to make sure that we, really use the funds in a manner that is required within our law. So there are some times when a family member will come in and they'll say, I heard VR will pay for this for the summer. It depends on whether it's a pre-employment transition service. So we're working through that now. We're having a lot of conversation with the school districts right now. So if you're eligible for services or potentially eligible for services, we really want to provide pre-employment transition services to you. It's also interesting that we can open a case when it's appropriate and provide other services to the student. So there's a whole array of opportunity for the connection between the VR program and the schools and the students prior to graduation. And that's one of the more exciting things about the reauthorization for me. So what are we doing in terms of pre-employment services in New Jersey? So we have identified a pre-employment counselor who is in every office. So I have 17 offices. Some of the offices have more than one identified counselor because in New Jersey we have over 76,000 students who currently qualify for pre-employment transition services. We are working diligently with the State Department of Education to coordinate the services. So as Lisa said, some of the schools provide incredible services, and we don't need to come in and provide the same services. What we need to do is coordinate it so we can ensure that the students get what they need prior to graduation. We are also working in partnership with the Centers for Independent Living to provide some of these services for students, and we look forward to continued collaboration within the local offices for this structure. We've had several model demonstrations. New Jersey was one of the last states to ever identify Project Search, which is an internationally evidence-based transition program. And I'm very happy to say that currently we've just finished our first year in 4 sites, 2 in Bergen, 1 in Union, and 1 in Camden. That is considered a pre-employment transition service model, and we're looking forward to expanding in Hudson County, and I have my eye on Sussex County and also in Morris County. So if there's interest in that, please reach out to us, and we will certainly start the conversation about if you live in another county. The other thing we're doing, the WIOA talks a lot about internships and apprenticeships. So we've entered into a model demonstration with the vocational schools, and the first one we did was in Middlesex County, where we actually supported their structured learning, their summer structured learning, and helped the students with stipends. They actually got paid for their internship in the structured learning. And all of the skills that they gained in terms of learning to get to work on time, figuring out how to get there with transportation, learning the soft skills needed in order to remain at the sites, whether or not the sites that they identified as part of their curriculum were actually things that they thought they would really like doing. Some of them ended up realizing that their school goals were not necessarily what they thought they would be, and they wanted to change their major, which was very important information. But I think the most critical piece was the connection with the VR office, because all the students have open cases, and now they have the benefit of not only the school district supporting them, but they have the counselor that meets with them on a very regular basis, which is a very important piece, again, with that counseling and career emphasis for the students. And then we've worked with the county colleges. In Bergen County in particular, we helped their model where students with more intellectual disabilities were attending. We actually had them move toward an industry sector strategy where the students end up with a nationally recognized credential at the end of their 2 years there. And again, prior to graduation, if a student moves to that program, we can certainly come in and help support that financially. I also want to talk about our industry sector. New Jersey also has an industry sector strategy, and we have 6 industries that we've identified, and the counselors are work with the students to talk about that, so a student can come up with with the realization that reality that comes in with their dreaming. So if they want to pursue a certain career, and the counselor can talk to them about the reality about whether or not it's feasible, whether or not that career is within reach in terms of transportation for them, so the students can really identify what they need to do in order to reach that dream, so they have enough information to move forward in a positive way. We have a business outreach unit as well. It's new. We're probably the new kids on the block in terms of the other presenters here today, because ours just came on board the middle of May. But we are regional, and we are working as consultants with our local offices and with the businesses. As Steve has mentioned, New Jersey has some pretty large companies, including Prudential, which is one of our net participants, and New Jersey has taken the lead to work with them as they move forward in providing and hiring individuals with disabilities. Our businesses reach out to us all the time, and I keep telling them that you don't want to hire people with disabilities. You want to hire qualified candidates who happen to have disabilities. So it's about the match. It's not about the category of disability. And that's important for our business consultants as they also reach out to all the companies that are in New Jersey to make those connections. I've included our local office contact information. And so you're welcome to call. We have 17 offices, and we are able to reach the entire state. I will tell you that this year I closed an office in one location, but in Warren County, but we're going to open an office in Warren County as soon as we get the new location. So I will again have 18 offices hopefully by September. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
And you made it just on time.
I knew I talked too much.
Does anyone have some questions for Alice? A lot of information. I love the slide you showed, Alice, that shows the process, the 4 different sections of the process. I think that's really helpful for families. So it doesn't look like anyone is typing. So I don't want to not give Libby all her time. So I'm going to pull her up so we can continue on. So I'd like to welcome Libby Stone Sterling, who is the Assistant Director from Maine's Vocational Rehabilitation Services. Thank you, Libby, for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Don, and thank you to my co-presenters. It's been a lot of good information that I've enjoyed hearing this morning, too. I'm happy to talk to you about what we're doing here in Maine, and I'm going to, because we've heard quite a bit already about the process, I'm going to move through a couple of those slides fairly quickly and focus on some examples of things that we're doing here in Maine that I think may be of interest. So I just wanted to point out that Maine is an employment-first state, and we have really been very active over the last couple of years of embracing this idea that everyone is able to work and be fully integrated into employment and community living. And we've had buy-in both from the Department of Labor, where we're housed, also from education, and from the Department of Health and Human Services. And this has been a wonderful collaborative effort that has tied in very well with WIOA. We are, as I mentioned, in the Department of Labor, and we have our sister agency, the Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired, who is also there as well. In Maine, we have about 25 BR counselors who are focused specifically on transition-age youth. So every high school has an assigned BR counselor, and that has really helped us to make those relationships with schools and to begin, as we're getting into the phase of WIOA now, where we're doing much more around pre-employment transition services, to really build on those relationships. We serve about 10,000 people a year, and over a third of those are young people who are in the transition age population. So I'm going to skip through the pieces on referring students and WIOA. I will just pause briefly on this slide, though, which is the 5 pre-employment transition services that were mentioned earlier. And these are the 5 new services: job exploration counseling, work-based learning experience, counseling on opportunities for post-secondary training and education, workplace readiness, and instruction in self-advocacy that we are really charged to do more with now under WIOA. So to just kind of jump into some examples of how we're doing that here in Maine. For one piece, we're doing a lot around summer work experiences. We know the research really tells us that students with disabilities having a paid work experience while they're in high school makes a big difference. And so we really embrace the idea that if young people are doing work, they should be paid for that work. Last summer, we ran this program as a pilot program in participation with our CTE school, one of our CTE schools, Lake Region Vocational Center, and we tried this out with 7 students. Now we have this year a number of students from this center who are again participating, but we've ramped up to about 200 students across the state right now who are doing summer work experience, which is very exciting. And this partnership with the Vocational Center is a new partnership for us, and we have the kids working in the community. In this particular example, the kids are working in the community, in community businesses. The VR is paying the wage, and they're also attending a soft skills workshop in conjunction with our Center for Independent Living. And we have peer mentors through the center who are leading the soft skills workshop. So we're seeing a way of building a lot of partnerships and looking at some new opportunities that we haven't had in the past. We've also done much more of a focus on what we're calling youth career exploration days. So getting young people out into the community. One of the things that we see in Maine is we're a very rural state, but a lot of young people, particularly young people with disabilities, have not had a chance to see what work looks like in their community. They haven't had a chance to get out there and explore different opportunities that are right there local for them. And so this has been a wonderful way to partner with businesses, and as Steve talked at the beginning, this is very much the focus of WIOA is how do we partner with businesses. Maine has a very old workforce. We're the oldest in the nation, and so we are looking for young people, and we want more young people to be prepared for employment. And so introducing this really untapped workforce to employers has been wonderful. We've had a great reception. And this is building off, some of you might be familiar with the Disability Mentoring Day events that happen in October. And this has been a way to build off of that and also over National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Another activity that we're doing to help support pre-employment transition services are job clubs in the school. And these have been very well received. In the picture that's on the screen, you have some students, you have some of our staff, and we also partner with the local university, University of Maine Farmington in this case, with undergraduate students in the rehabilitation counseling program and brought them in for a pre-service activity. So one of the things that we know in VR is that we are a relatively small agency, and we can't be all things to all people. So looking for those partnerships are really, really important. And in this case, bringing in, we've oftentimes worked with graduate students, but to bring in some of the undergraduate students into some of these activities has been a great way to explore a new partnership, and for the young people to really have some fun activities, and for the students at the university level to be exposed to students that they would potentially, or the types of students that they would potentially be working with later on. We're doing a lot of very interesting collaborations with schools, and as I think has already been mentioned, different schools have different strengths, they have different programming, and we really are trying to individualize our programming to work with what the school has. So we're not going into the school and saying, here's a cookie cutter, take it or leave it, of services that we can provide. We're really listening to what their needs are, what the students' needs are, and then trying to partner with them And some schools are already doing a lot of work in the community, but a lot of other schools don't have those community connections. So we're using our staff who know the employers in the community to help to bridge that, to set up tours, the mock interviews, really emphasize the importance of getting kids out into the community and raising those aspirations that young people are going to be able to work, and there's going to be places for them to work in the community. We're also, as I mentioned, we're doing quite a bit with our Center for Independent Living. We just have one here in Maine. It's called Alpha One. And one of the projects we're working on right now is to do a series of recorded webinars. So we do have peer mentor staff that are out working in the school, but geographically we're a pretty large state. And in order to reach all of the high schools in the state, we're trying this approach of recording a webinar series or a series of videos on these different topics that you see listed here around peer mentoring, financial literacy, self-advocacy, really important topics that we know that students need to hear before they exit high school, but we don't always have a way to get out and to physically get into all the schools. So I invite you to go to the website. We've got a couple of the webinars that are done and the videos that are done that are up there, and then between now and September we'll be posting the rest of them. So this is exciting. I'll be interested to see the response as we start to roll this out. We also have a grant that we got recently through the federal government to work on doing more around work-based learning, and this is a model demonstration grant. And we're partnering with our Jobs for Maine's Grads, which is part of the National Jobs for America's Grads Network, to really build on some of the great work and success that they've had with young people, and to see if there's a way to include more students with more significant disabilities in their programming and combine it with another initiative called the Progressive Employment that I'll speak to you about in just a second, to see what happens in terms of improving post-secondary education and employment outcomes. So again, this is great timing for WIOA because it's all moving us in the same direction that we want to go. We are doing a fair amount of outreach to families, and we've been working with our Maine Parent Federation here in the state to look at ways that we can do even more. We've participated in transition fairs and parent nights, certainly working together on presentations, and we have actually an event coming up. We've just been planning for about 10 days' time up in the northern part of the state, way up almost to Canada, where we'll be trying to reach some youth and parents around self-advocacy. So this is a piece that, again, is really supported in WIO of how is it that we're going to connect more with families. And as I mentioned to you briefly, we are doing a pilot that started based on a model in Vermont, the Progressive Employment Model, which has been very successful. And we've focused here specifically on the youth population. And it's a dual customer model, so it's all about both meeting the employer's needs and meeting the young person's needs. And it has the philosophy that everyone is ready for something. So we know that not all young people are ready to go right into a job, but they may very well be ready for informational interview and job shadows, work into paid work experience. We've had about 200 young people participate in it so far, and it's really been fantastic. And just yesterday I was on a webinar as we're going to begin to expand this to 2 other regions of our state. And the employer response has been wonderful because it's a fairly low risk, no risk opportunity for the business community. We also have a great curriculum called the Transition Career Exploration Workshop curriculum, and it's a number of modules. You can go in and do one module, or a teacher could offer all modules. It can be designed in many different ways. We've used it with organizations. We've used it in schools and adult ed. And the link is right there. And it's a free online curriculum. So if any of you are interested in getting it, just go to that link and download it. I'm happy to talk with folks at any time about the workshop and implementing it at any time. So I know we're coming right up on 1 o'clock, and I just want to leave a couple minutes. There's the last couple slides here around strategies to improve collaboration both at school and at home. And this is really, I think, what we're hoping in our work right now in Maine is to reach more young people with the message that having a disability does not mean that you're not going to be able to work. And the more that young people are out with early experiences, working in the community, experience success, starting to talk about employment at the dinner table, we know that that's going to change both expectations at school, at home, our own expectations about what's possible for young people. So I think it's a very, very exciting time to be working in vocational rehabilitation, and I see we're coming right up to the end of the hour, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Libby. So does anyone have any questions for Libby or for any of the other presenters? I'm hoping that there's no issue with Adobe, because I did receive a text from someone telling me that their screen is blank and they can't type in the chat box. I'm hoping that others are not having that problem. I did put the 800 number up. If someone is having an issue and they can't type, you could call 877-713-0446 and put the code 101-725-8988, and you could ask your question that way. So I'm going to give it a few minutes just to see if anyone has any questions. And I thought it was great, Libby, that you put that link up for people to download that curriculum as well. I think that's real helpful. Let's just give it another few seconds. I just want to remind everyone that this is recorded, so if you were having issues, technology issues, you can go on the SPAN website to the REACH page, which is under Programs, and all the webinars that were recorded are listed there. You can also view them and download the information or resources from the file section. The PowerPoints are also here in the file section if you'd like to get a copy of that. When you exit out of the webinar, you will be routed to a survey. We ask that you please fill that out because your comments are very important to us. That's how we determine what other webinars we will do. So please fill that out. And I can tell you that the next webinar in our series of community resources will be centered around the Centers for Independent Living. We're in the process of coordinating that, and it's going to be sometime in late fall. So we will be sending that information out. So I see that no one is typing and no one has called in. I'm not sure if that just means no one has questions or if you're having technical issues. But I want to again thank Steve, Lisa, Alice, and Libby for their help with us today. And we truly do appreciate, as I know you all do, the collaboration between all of us, and as our goal is really to educate and empower families on the transition process, as well as youth and young adults with disabilities. So thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It was very easy working with you all, so thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and end because, again, there are no questions, and I'm not really sure what that means. So I think we're going to, does someone have a question? No? Let's see. I see somebody's trying to type, but I'm not sure if it's going to go through. So I'm going to go ahead and end since it is 1 o'clock. Thank you so much. Please keep an eye out for our future webinars, and we thank you for joining us today. Thank you again to our presenters, and have a good day, everyone.